Good morning, Matt.
Guys, still waiting for a couple more to trickle in.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. All right, let's not punish the punctual too much.
Oh, no problem. I was getting my own refreshment since I obviously wouldn't be there to get whatever you're going to bring in. So of course, it's still kind of early here in California. So I was just getting my breakfast, actually.
What's the weather there? Please don't tell me. Don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Nah, you don't know. No snow, no rain. Yeah, it's overcast today. Kind of cool. About 55 out. So
Sometimes Zoom doesn't play well with Microsoft. Can you guys see my screen?
yep.
Okay. All right. Grab the doors quick and let's kick this off. A couple of people requested that we record this. Everybody okay with recording? Anybody camera shy or not feeling? It's up to you guys.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I don't know if I've got my camera on, but Is it just Reggie and I?
Uh,
Yeah, I see Reggie on.
I'm on.
You there, Reggie? Oh, good morning.
Dustin's in the room, you can probably see.
Morning. Trying to keep lots of things in the air this morning, so I'm probably going to be kind of quiet, but I will watch.
There we go. Oh, we are recording. Okay, that's sounds good. Well, let's kick this off. So I usually do a little bit of priming. Okay. I usually do a little bit of priming with the teams, kind of little dog and pony show, warm-up exercises before I get into the training. So I'll give the pleasure for another time. So one of the things that we do with the Agile teams is we create working agreements. So at this part of the show, we usually will say, okay, for the next 2 days that we're in training, what works for you guys? When do you want to come in, come out? Is it okay for everybody to just jump in and ask questions, or do we need to raise hands? So simple ground rules. And the reason why we do this is because the same thing is suggested to, not required, but semi-suggested to the teams to have the working agreement on how often we have our meetings, what style of communication, do we need to call everybody in the office at least once a month? With remote people, do we use Zoom, do we use Skype, when do we use it, all that kind of stuff. So about an hour is spent thinking about that as a team, and the outcomes are drafted on some type of document, and they're entered into our new SharePoint Confluence. Confluence is Jira's little brother that basically mirrors SharePoint with its functionality. So document is drafted, and it's a live document. The team revisits this every 3 months, and the reason being is so that everybody commits to something. Not everybody can be made happy, but the team discusses what the team norms are, and the team norms are entered into this document, and they're kind of self-enact, self-enforce type of situation where a manager is hands-off and the team itself decides what to do. And that's a very standard thing that Agile teams do. And it's that kind of stuff. When we call breaks, interrupting, all that stuff. So we do a mini version during the training. We kind of do the same, run a mock agreement just for the day of the training with the teams. And then next we jump into the presentation of why Agile. So at this point, I ask them to stay back to back for a minute. And that's about as uncomfortable as you can make people get without explaining why they're doing that, without actually breaching any, I don't know, privacy concerns or HR being called. And all that dog and pony show is to elicit that we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And we need to get a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty. So I spent a little bit more time going through this and explaining that in order to respond to changes that make us uncomfortable, we need to get used to being uncomfortable. And this is actually Ben's slide, and I like the chocolate factory, so I kept it. I'm so skeptical, my skepticism. It is very healthy to be skeptical, and Agile is basically changing the operating system on things that we've been doing for, what, 40 years? So this slide basically calls out that, yes, it's okay. This is a little bit of a debunking slide about why are we doing all this? Why are we spending all these millions disrupting things and ways of doing work that have been successful for so many years. And the strategic, this digs back to keep strategy about going faster. Debunks the myth that we're just running and doing features and all these work items and ignoring all these necessary things that we've been doing so far, like maintenance. And the third plus, one of the pluses of Agile, the feedback loops. That's the whole reason why we're splitting everything in 2-week cycles, and then we go quarterly, so that we allow the clients to give their feedback as frequently as possible, so that when they say, I'm not liking what you guys built, we say, well, where were you? We gave you about 7 chances in the last quarter to come sit with us and shoot calls at what we're doing. Why didn't you say anything, right? It kind of keeps the clients on the hook and invested as much as we are. So in your guys' world, I'm just running this as if I'm running it to a production team. It's very different. So to me, instead of the clients, that will be the internal clients, that will be the teams, that will be finding ways to invite feedback with possibly the dev leads, the dev managers, Ryan, and those guys. That's what I'm assuming. That's even if you guys decide to assume any kind of 2-weekly or 3-weekly cadence of sprints, you guys might want to run them in 1 month or 2 months, or you might just do a whole quarter. That's still kind of firming up and it's up in the air. But nevertheless, having these feedback loops and allowing the client to shoot calls, regardless of who that stakeholder is a good thing. And it's one of the reasons why Agile is, in 2019, it's still alive and well after what, about 20 years of existence. So that's the marketing side of things, going back and connecting what we're doing, again, to the clients. What we are doing should be usable, sellable, feasible, and valuable. These are kind of product development tenets, going back to the basics. And one of the reasons why Agile has been so strong is that it constantly enforces that learning. All these annoying meetings that you're probably already hearing people complaining about, meeting after meeting after meeting. Well, some of these meetings actually have a purpose. For example, the retrospective. It's all about sitting down and say, hey, we've been working hard for 2 weeks. Let's look back and see how we did. Can we take an hour of our valuable time every 2 weeks and see what we're actually learning? Because we have a lot of feedback, but if we're just talking past each other and not just sit down and analyze how we did and what we need to do to improve it, are we really improving as a team? And so another blurb about learning. This comes from a very famous book in the Agile community from Norm Keith. This digs back that in order to make things transparent and inspect and adapt, we can't have transparency without sitting back and saying, okay, it's okay to shoot calls at what we do. It's okay to take a little bit more criticism without pointing fingers and be constructive with each other. And here we talk a little bit about work itself, work breakdown, certainty to uncertainty, how waterfall, which is the most popular traditional way of doing things, everything was predefined, requirements, most of the information needed to kick things off, and basically the entire project was predefined in advance and with some very robust and healthy planning. While Agile is more on the uncertainty side, we basically just dig in and jump in the ocean, and then we figure out how we're going to swim in many ways. Learning by doing, do a little bit more skill with these guys. So another one of the most basic kind of differences between Agile and other approaches is Agile, top left corner, keeps things visible, while, for example, in Waterfall, we make the planning gets submitted, the committees or whoever approves the work approves it, and then for weeks, if not months, that communication kind of goes behind the scenes between the teams and the clients and the major stakeholders. until towards the end of the project, people start asking, where are you, what have you done? And then a lot of that communication picks back up. Agile's jam is that, well, if we can do this continuously instead of predefine things and then reconnect after a few months or a year and a half in our case, a lot better. Adaptability, same thing. If we're running in 2-week or we're releasing quarterly cycles, even if we fail, we burn a quarter's worth of money rather than a year and a half, and then having to run through complex mechanisms of mitigation. We just expose things up front and we adapt as the stakeholders like or as the client, which is in a way nice for us because the management and clients are just as much on the hook as we are. Rather than in a year's worth of time, them saying, that's definitely not what I wanted from you. Business value. So you get to eat your cake first in Agile, rather than wait for the entire dinner to be over. So in the Agile community, at least, it's considered that if we're delivering frequently, the client is getting value frequently. So it's kind of like the wife and the flowers. Rather than ask for forgiveness and bring flowers at the end of 3 weeks where you haven't been as nice to your wife, this is being nice to your wife every day. So you derive that as value frequently. So rather than beg for forgiveness and kind of mitigating things at the end, kind of a nice guy every day. So I get in trouble when I have women in the room with this. So I trust that a team of architects can take this a little bit better. Risk is also down when it comes to Agile for the same reasons, right? We give every stakeholder chances to shoot holes through what we're doing frequently, so that, at least in theory and in reality, in many ways, decreases the risk down. And I don't want to be just a boring talking head and put you guys to sleep. By all means, I want this to be a conversation, ask questions, shoot holes. That's what I'm here for. So, can a manifesto be drawn? So, since you guys are architects, I'm going to tell you the real, kind of the truth behind how the whole Agile thing came out. So, some of the high caliber, almost on a theoretical level and also on practical level, architects and developers that had big names in the community started corresponding to each other. This is when email was out already and was well established, and they started exchanging emails about 99, 98, 99 about, well, how are things going for you guys? Because a lot of our projects are not too healthy. They're not doing well. We need to do things a little bit different, but we have some ideas. Maybe we should get together. And finally, I am not sure who is responsible for organizing them, but they decided to go up in Utah on a skiing trip in 2001, the winter of 2001. And kind of what I put together from a lot of the stories, there was a lot of skiing and a lot of libations involved in between in the evenings and a lot of good conversations. So they spent about a week or so up there. And then towards the end of the week, among all the drinking, somebody said, weren't we supposed to talk about something more concrete? Because we've been having a lot of grievances, but we haven't put anything kind of on paper, or we haven't made any decisions. And then the rest of the people were like, we'll talk about that later. And so the XP people, the extreme programming representatives in the room, kind of put their whiskey aside, and they said, well, let's get some paper cards and at least put our grievances on paper and see if we can agree on anything at all. Because it seems like things are not too healthy in the industry right now. A lot of project failure, a lot of complaints against IT. Is there anything we can do better? And they came up with the things that they had a consensus on were customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So directly making the client happy and giving voice to the client over elaborate contracts makes everybody much happier across the board and establishes trust. individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That's one of the grievances. They found that sometimes we get too bogged down into following the process to the T and who's responsible for what, rather than looking at each other and saying, what do we really need to solve the problem, rather than hung up on technicalities. Responding to change over following a plan, kind of in the same spirit. Sometimes we need to roll with the punches rather than have a perfect execution. And then working software over full documentation, right? We can get beautiful business requirement documents and beautiful schemas, but if we're not delivering working software to the client, what's the point?
But as I'm often reminded, because I love to cite that particular manifesto more than any of the others, is there is inherent ways in the process, both between, say, like documenting the contracts and message sets, and when we build stories on the backlog, that those items still become the documentation items. So there is inherent documentation that gets created as part of the Agile process. So between backlog grooming and setting up the stories and setting up acceptance criteria, and breaking an epic down into stories, and all of that history then is actually what becomes our is also translated into some of the documentation that we still obviously need as the industry. But I'm the first one that always likes to remind people that manifesto is, we want software more than we want to worry about documenting it. But there are built-in ways, and the process itself has effective ways of self-documenting. And then same with the code, then allowing the coders to actually correctly self-document the code and all that also is very beneficial, and allows us to maintain the SDLC products that we have to provide. So sorry to I didn't want to steal your thunder, but that very particular one, and I have a long that particular manifesto, and I have a long history. So.
Oh no, this is great. I like it when we make it real. I hate PowerPoint presentations. I personally, even the most brilliant ideas that excite me, when I see them in a PowerPoint, they rock me to sleep, and I start falling asleep. So I like it when you guys make it real. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And the actual manifesto, the last line is one of the most overlooked. It says, while we value, because in the manifesto, things are set left and right. So customer collaboration will be on the left side, and contract negotiation will be on the right side. And the very last statement of the Agile Manifesto is, while we value things on the left more, we also recognize that things on the right need to be done as well.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
I didn't know that, actually. That's new information, that that there's a left and right delineation of weight to these particular ones. But I own the fact, like, I'd rather be coding than writing documentation. I mean, and I assume most of the people in here would agree with that. I was just kind of reiterating I'm the 100% the first one to be like, let's write code, let's not write documentation. But there's a reality to it. But also, acknowledging that the process itself helps augment some of that. I mean, that there is a self-fulfilling prophecy for our documentation, as long as we're doing Agile and doing the ceremonies and the processes that are of an Agile system correctly. We still can achieve all that SDLC stuff that we have to live with anyway. So I think I made my point. I'll stop babbling.
No, you're good. You're good. I like this. I have no intent to go through every single slide today. I just wanted to go back to the basics, because the spirit of Agile is exactly what you said. They're sometimes paying more attention to actually giving the client what they want. And on the other hand, you're absolutely right. We work for a very heavily regulated industry, and not documenting things is just not sustainable.
Yeah.
We can't do that. But I guess It's on the top. I didn't see it before. That is well, there's value in the items on the right, we value things on the left more. So these architects and computer scientists, in their drinking and infinite wisdom, were able to catch themselves even back 20 years ago and put that out there. So people have been saying that this manifesto no longer applies. It's been dying for 20 years, according to many, and yet a large part of the software industry is using Agile, and a lot of the wisdom within these four statements still kind of lives on and is just as strong today. So there are 12 principles behind the manifesto. This is a little bit cut and dry. They're one of those things that when you read them, you're like, yeah, it makes sense, makes sense, makes sense. And that's where I run a little bit of an exercise with people. I divide them in groups and they tell which one they like the most. So this is a few years later, once the Agile organization started forming, some of the same people that met in Utah revisited things, and they said, well, these four statements are great, but what's the meat behind them? What are we really trying to say? And they expanded on them a little bit on what really goes behind the Agile manifesto. So customer satisfaction, welcoming change even late, working software delivered frequently, daily cooperation between business people and developers. Then this speaks more to, sometimes we tend to hold ourselves in our cubicles and just say, I just need to get stuff done. But then there's a tremendous value also in partnering with different people that can give us different views, and we can run things by and also challenge us with their ideas. Projects built around motivated individuals who should be trusted. That is huge. To me, that means I don't need a manager to look over my shoulder 24/7, not even on a daily basis, maybe not even on a weekly, how about quarterly, right? You know, we hire the right people, we pay them a lot of money so that we can trust them to get the work done. Face-to-face conversation is the best form of communication. That's why us Agile coaches, we get bent out of shape when on camera I don't see faces. But that's a personal beef. That's what they call that, professional impediment? Impediment? No, impairment. Because we talk so much about face-to-face. Do you guys know what percentage of communication when measured in effectiveness is verbal talking? They say that it's about 7%. Anywhere between 40 and 80% of communication when measured in effectiveness is the body language. And what is being said is actually around 7%. And that changes and varies over time with studies, but the consistent factor is that body language is perhaps the most important part of communication. Should we have phone call conversations? Absolutely. Working software is the primary measure of progress. We talked about that. Sustainable development, able to maintain a constant pace. This is one of the most common sense elements of Agile, but probably one of the biggest bones of contention, because basically with this simple statement, we're telling people that we need to put an end to firefighting, and we need to get better eliciting feedback up front to eliminate firefighting, because a lot of the production teams are getting themselves, in the industry, not just us, are getting themselves burned out by constant firefighting and escalations from hell, with us having no effect on what happens before us. So constant pace is more about determining the capacity for a team and the individuals within, and saying, this is how much we can get done in these 2 weeks or this quarter, and let's try to finish what we commit rather than keep adding more and more and more on and piling on and not being able to commit to anything and just constant firefighting. Some industries harder to do, other industries very easy to do. We're somewhere perhaps in the middle. Can we eliminate firefighting? Probably not. Can we make things better? You bet. There are many practices and habits and ways to organize work to include that transparency that can actually help clear out processes. And more importantly, it will expose the bottlenecks that are actually causing us to firefight in the first place, rather than just throw our hands up and say, well, that's the nature of business. We need to keep escalating things, and that's the way to do it. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design. That rings true to you guys as the group probably more so than to anybody out there. Simplicity, maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And there are a lot of proponents of this statement that go around the community and say the most work that we do is the work not done, and that confuses people and makes people angry. But really, deciding what we need, and even more so knowing what we don't need to get done, all the fluff and all the bells and whistles and the boilerplating that may never be used by clients, and more importantly, the clients never want to pay for. If we don't get that work done and instead we concentrate on what the client really wants and needs, is the way to go. Best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Peter Drucker, the father of modern management, in the 50s and the 60s, did elaborate studies on businesses coast to coast in the US, and it continuously emerged that the teams that are the happiest and the ones that got the most done and were most effective tended to be more self-organizing than not. And the guy won a ton of awards in the 60s. He was all over Forbes and all the Wall Street and business publications. And then people gave him the awards, and the Wall Street community said, okay, thank you, and people moved on. And it wasn't until the Agile movement that we started revisiting these findings that self-organizing teams are much more efficient than micromanaged teams. That's one of the things that we're aiming with both you guys and the production teams to almost assume a little bit on that manager and project manager role. And by giving you tools like Jira, instead of telling you what to move, what when, you are more in control of your work, both as a group, as individuals. And by having that transparency, you're not constantly asked about when are we get there, when are we gonna get there, when can you give me this? So huge mind shift there as well. Regularly, the team reflects on how to become more effective and adjust accordingly. This is, again, being agile, being able to respond to change rather than just follow a plan that may or may not get us there. So being flexible with the work rather than following the plan. So we can modify the plan rather than follow it to the T. Sometimes by modifying the plan, we get there much faster and we get to the right place much quicker. Anything ring true or anything that you guys don't agree with on the 12 principles?
No, that's,
No.
I've always, yeah. Nope, this has always kind of rung true and worked well. Again, I'm not going to sit here painting this like I'm some agile expert, but in the little bit of experience and projects where we've done it, all of this seems to, I mean, the manifesto looks good. Some of this really doesn't come to fruition as much as we would like. So I would like to see us really, really push these principles to the teams and to the project managers and all that stuff. But no, I'm on board.
I'll say even this morning, I was on a Premier 10.0 call and we were talking with the data centers on, instead of delivering a whole bunch of stuff at once and having them start their testing, trying to deliver more frequently, even from their testing aspect, let alone doing releases like you were talking about. But, that's an important piece that I think we all recognize that, we need to get better at delivering chunks of things and having people review it and not do it all at the end. And so that's a challenge for everybody.
Back in the day, manufacturing set the gold standard, right? If we create big chunks of things, it's cheaper on inventory, it's easier to work on it. Mass production, we can't argue with it. I mean, Tesla's proven it. Tesla, as good as it is, it's still, if it doesn't have a large production, huge batches, if it's not mass producing, it's hard to compete. With software, we assumed that back in the day, but then the shift it has come that these huge batches carry a lot of costs with them. And if we deliver everything in huge batches and yet we're customizing, that's the difference between software and manufacturing. In software, even with the most prescriptive documents that get every detail to the T, once we get to the brass tacks of how we're going to create that software, it still is going to vary from the plan. So in reality, we're always doing custom software, no matter what we think and no matter what we say. And that customization makes it a lot different than the manufacturing mentality and the manufacturing way of doing things. So the irony is that we still manage software and we manage the knowledge workers that make software the way we manage manufacturing. And yet we're requiring them to create extremely complex custom work that needs a lot of feedback. So in effect, when we treat things as big batches and we deliver after a year and a half, and the clients and the stakeholders are not able to shoot holes through what we're doing and give us feedback continuously, we basically pretend like we knew everything up front and we can just deliver it in a year and a half. And sometimes it happens, but the industry statistics show that up to 80% of projects out there in waterfall don't do as well. And that's another topic that we can talk for days and days and debate. There are a lot of great smart proponents in the waterfall communities that make great cases that by modifying waterfall itself, you don't need Agile and you can do a lot of great things with it. I do not disagree. I think both waterfall and Agile have a place in certain environments.
See, the biggest and this is just my personal opinion, so I'll waterfall, at least in my mind, and you guys can agree or disagree, it always seemed like it made a lot of sense when it's a really small kind of we need to change this label to say something else, right? I mean, you don't need to create a document, say, here it is, give that to development, they make the change, it goes off to QC, and it's done, right? I mean, small, simple, really self-contained, pretty straightforward kind of projects seem like they would be the natural, obvious choice, even in our environment, to continue to be like a waterfall. You don't have to create a backlog story. I mean, I'm sure we will, but that always seemed to make the most sense. The bigger the project gets, so like if you're starting to talk 10.0 or you're building a new application or you're rewriting, the transaction functionality where you want, I mean, no one's going to argue with a label change or you don't need a lot of customer feedback and you don't need to get opinions and get direction on that. And that's pretty extreme, but that always seemed like it still would remain a pretty obvious type of thing that where waterfall makes a lot of sense. So it always was based on size in my mind.
And there are things that you just need to have predefined. Would you, for example, build a water tower or a dam using Agile, where you have a team of people and they ask the architect, so how much concrete should we put at the base of the dam? And you go, let's just put some, and then, in 2 weeks we'll decide what to do. No, you have to have that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point too. Good analogy.
So some things and some projects, also housing projects, houses that are built the exact same way, they're cookie cutters. Would you want a team out there solving complex problems and a bunch of knowledge workers doing custom work when you're building cookie cutter stuff? No, and that's why you can just traditional project management, like a builder project manager in construction, they just plug in the numbers into the spreadsheets and then can plus minus 1 day, they can predefine things. What I always get a kick is that for road construction, it should be the exact same thing, right? They know exactly how thick that asphalt is. They know exactly how many days it's gonna take them, because they've done it a million times with certain tools, certain number of people, how they're gonna scrape off the old concrete. And still that sucker, when I look at the budget of the county, it goes plus minus 30 million. And in my mind I'm thinking they just plug it into a spreadsheet, right? They can be off 2-3 days, and it's always millions upon millions of differences. And I'm being indifferent. I know there's politics that go into it and a lot of corruption and stuff, but still blows my mind.
And now they have to raise taxes on us because they didn't budget well enough for the last however many years to actually manage road construction. So now they're going to raise taxes to fund the lack of funding they've had for however many years for road construction. So
look at the next, what Agile teams need from their leaders: ability to rapidly learn, environment that tolerates mistakes. This is kind of more so than pointing fingers and saying, I told you, saying, oh, maybe I should have been the one to warn you even before you get there, or let's learn from it. And if we get a new member of the team, let's maybe take away a learning so that when that person starts on the team, we know how to warn them, and we have somewhere. And talking about documentation, that's a good opportunity to even document a few things that we learned as a team. Let them get things done rather than start lots of things. This is David Anderson, the creator of Kanban, once said, let's start finishing and stop starting. Because if you start 15 number ones and you have only room for 2, then you have about, 1.5% of, or 15% of 10 things done, and the client is not getting anything. So sometimes it's good to hold back and just let us finish a few things, fewer things, but actually have them done now. Whether that can be done in reality when you have some very powerful people screaming at our stakeholders is another thing, but it's still good as kind of a point to focus and concentrate rather than try to make everybody happy at once. Focus on value goals instead of just dates. This is also a hard transition for us to think in terms of value. This is what's keeping a lot of our product leadership awake at night, kind of in their mind, thinking how crazy this Agile thing is, that we're not talking in terms of dates, but we're talking in terms of value. But the most important question should always remain, what does the client want? Value is determined by the client. Can value be expressed in dates? Sometimes not. Replace detailed planning and estimating with prototypes, demos, and feedback. So that kind of goes back to, are we building a water tower and a dam, or are we building custom software that we need to have something out there that's usable by the banks? And maybe the bank should always have a seat, and we should run a lot of options and have a lot more communication with those guys rather than assuming that because they've been happy for many years with what we've given them, they'll be happy again. And feedback, again, these feedback loops, constantly having transparency on all levels and even to the clients on what we're working on, so that if we're on the wrong path, we can write off the last 2 weeks and say, okay, we'll go back to the right path, rather than go for a year buried into work that the client maybe in their heads, we need to go a different direction. Participate in hard conversations, accept the hard truths. We already talked about being open and kind of be even more open, create new habits of communication to where we can, as a team, be more introspective and dig deeper on root causes without squabbles and yelling at each other. Help them think big, but supporting starting small. This is kind of more reining in the product side and the people on portfolio level, while saying it's okay for you to think big. It's not okay for you to dump the whole sink on me and expect me to do it in a quarter, and shift away from that mentality of big bang, start on 500 things, and rather focus on a few things and keep clients in the loop. Empower them to solve their problems. This is more, why do you hire super smart people if you're gonna tell them what to do. That should ring true to you guys the most. Why do you hire these brilliant computer science minds if you're gonna tell them what to do? Shouldn't you tell them or I guess how to do it? So maybe we're told what to do and we figure out how we do it. Give them the context for why instead of telling how. Again, instead of solutioning it for the developers on the teams, it's easier to just say, hey, this is why and what we need. We trust you that you build the right stuff in collaboration with the business analysts and whoever else on the business side is working alongside you. What will change? So this involves you guys to new tools. You're already banging your head against Jira, Confluence. Confluence is a repository, Jira software, GitHub. Some of the teams are already starting to use GitHub as repository, and then as automation testing comes around, we're gonna start hearing weird names like Selenium and FT and things like that. New language, again, you guys are already knee deep in the features, epic, story sprint, all that craziness. No strangers to that. Some of you guys I know previously have been exposed even before that latest wave of Agile. New roles, product manager, product champion, flow wizard, a lot of weirdness. What the heck does that mean? Throughput is more important than task execution, meaning that in strictly manufacturing terms, me being perfect at getting that widget done in my station is less important than how many widgets we get out of the door and the client is happy. So perfection versus making the client happy. Sometimes we don't need to be so perfect as long as the client is happy, and we should focus more on how much we're churning out and what quality we're churning out and how happy the client is, which means value. Having hard conversations about fixing the problems. So a lot of people mistake Agile with Kumbaya, and a lot of people find out in a hurry that Agile is a lot more about doing things faster and being more efficient than being super friendly to each other. Actually, Agile, of all things, encourages constructive conflict. Because without conflict, we don't have innovation, we don't have diverse opinions that are being challenged. So we can definitely expect a lot of hard conversations, and a lot of them are already happening from what I can see. And this was my first deck of slides. Am I going too fast? Talking too much? Doing good? Quick?
I'm good. I don't know.
No, we're good.
Interesting at all, or? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of reinforcing some of the things that we've kind of heard. Some people, I've been involved a little bit with Agile projects, but not much. And so appreciate the overview there.
Sounds good. And if anything, when somebody from teams that you work with, a lead developer or developer, whoever you're working with, or manager says, well, the Agile people told us different, you can always say, well, I looked through the official deck. I didn't see any of that stuff there. So, you can kind of compare notes much easier on what's going on. And this was kind of the more level kumbaya, and this starts to kind of delve into the practices. So chartering, this is more of replacing all that heavy documentation of beautiful poetic explanations of the project that project managers used to do in the old world, and we're replacing it with a lot more lightweight living documents that can be drafted and changed at all times, and everybody knows where it is, instead of one project manager having it on their machine and then constantly modifying it and nobody even knowing what they're held up to. Everybody gets to participate in drafting the standards, and it's out there in Confluence, and everybody can go and change things. And as long as they bring them, of course, back to the group, a lot more transparency, openness, and a lot more skin in the game, because if you're finding the charter and you're helping make these changes and you're aligned with high-level management, people tend to have more skin in the game when their voices are being heard. So what's in the charter? What's the goal? 3 months from today. So this is basically when we pick on a new quarterly release. This is basically the model of the release. Why are we doing this? who are we doing it? What's the value behind it? Why are we doing this instead of something else? All these hard questions are being answered. Also risks, and you guys as architects, you guys have a lot, your line of sight is a lot further than anybody else. So I definitely can see you guys being involved in these charter conversations when a team is trying to kick off a new quarter. You already possibly are working on the stuff that they will be delving into the previous quarter. So you get a chance to chip in and give your architect's perspective there, rather than when things go south, them calling you and say, help us fix it. You get a seat on the table. Same thing goes for you guys as a team. We probably have to talk at some point about what makes sense. Do charters make sense for you guys at all? All that. And it looks like I only had one slide here. I like presentations like that. Okay. Quickly go through stories. So one of the things that are most different, visibly different, and worrisome about Agile, as opposed to the world as we knew it before Agile came around, is all these weird features and stories. So I try it as best to explain here to the teams, and this should be valuable to you guys. So any artifact, regardless if it's, I kind of took it way back, and I'm deviating from Ben's and Ken's slide. To me, any artifact, whether it's an old school waterfall PRD, requirement documents, or a Ben, or any of the blueprints that you guys are creating for the teams, an artifact should be detailed appropriately, estimated, emergent, and prioritized appropriately in order to work with the Agile world. Meaning, we need just the right amount of information to get the work done for that release. Estimated, I already hear questions about points in the hallways, even though as an Agile group, we're not yet introducing them in the crawl state. Emergent, meaning that we're responding to change, just like the manifesto says. If a new requirement emerges, we should be able to create an artifact that addresses that need in mid-flight. And prioritize no more 500 number ones, or at least if there are 500 number ones, somebody that gives the work to the team should say which one of the 500 number ones is a real number one, so that we can work on something rather than on 500 things. So format, there's a standard as a so-and-so persona. So I always give that temple analogy when I talk to architects. So if we're building a cathedral, so as a cardinal, I want 60-foot columns for Notre Dame, so that we create the most imposing cathedral the world has ever known. So it's a simple ask, and it contains who wants it, what they want, and why they want it. And when you know who wants what, why, you know the value of that ask to that person. And in many ways, the high level, the basic label and description of the features and the stories will have some type of format similar to that. Written only by one person means that one product person, one business proxy is responsible for these stories, for that ask. It might be something that is needed and decided by a committee, but we need to know who needs this and who benefits from that value the most. They go in Jira. Why do we use them? So the difference between any other artifacts, so these requirement documents that we still use and we use heavily in the old world, and these features and user stories, is that we around, instead of asking and starting on day one with how we're going to do it and kind of giving the solution dumped on there with all the requirements, we're really starting from the client and we're saying, how are we going to understand what the client really wants? Because we can deviate on requirements a lot. We can have a lot of yellow, we can have a lot of green, we can use different platforms to build something. But if we're not getting what the client needs in its essence and the spirit, and more importantly, why they need it, we could build the best things out there, we can create the best blueprints, but they could be 100% misaligned from the client. And that's where the user story term came from. It's the idea that if we're to build something, it has a reason behind it, and every reasoning has a background, and every background can be explained as a story. And the stories in the IT world, just like outside of the IT world, the purpose is not to have something artificial and abstract to confuse the IT people, but it's really to create a common understanding so that everybody understands what the client wants, and client always has a seat up front on every table when we're building things. Language isn't precise, so that's why we have the user stories and features are as brief as possible. And the sole purpose is that we see a piece of a story, but it's enough to start a conversation. And that's when the stakeholders and the product people come in and work side by side with us to figure out what is that common understanding that we're going to create. And rather than describing it, use a lot of images, use a lot of visuals, use a lot of diagrams. When you as technical people communicate what's possible to the product people all together and to the client, we can use a lot of visuals and a lot of abstract ways to explain why we're doing things rather than having cut and dry language that is not always as precise. So that's why conversations are better than requirement documents. 3 C's that make these artifacts successful: card, and in Jira, we use the electronic version of cards. The original XP cards were on paper. There were 3.5 pieces of paper that even the most complicated software was explained on a card. And if somebody read and said, this is not even beginning to explain it, then out of that card came 4 more. And then you keep going until you have enough cards to explain exactly the ideas of what you're trying to build and what you're building. From that come conversations. And at some point, somebody says, oh, I can build that for you. This is granular enough as software that I can get things started. And then you confirm. And then that jumps into Jira and becomes a thing. And then from then, work starts and work is being tracked. Jeff Patton, he's one of my favorites. He's definitely Ben's favorite. He basically wrote the Bible user stories applied on Agile product management. I cannot recommend his book more. So when Ben talks about products, you are going to see that guy a lot. The warm-up exercise, I walk them through breaking down a story, and we use a simple example of brushing our teeth and getting ready in the morning. How many different subtasks come to that, and we create a lot of stickies, we put them on the wall. It's a dog and pony show, but it helps people get used to thinking in terms of telling a story. So we use story as a term not only because the information content runs like a story, but because stories evolve, they have a life of their own, and that's why the visual representations of artifacts in Agile usually run left to right, and this is how the story evolves in time. So if this is a simple check deposit, then the first story will be, okay, logging from the teller. Second story will be the screen they see, and in general, stories will be placed in that continuum actually as the client sees the value and the way that the client's work and tasks flow. I created this slide because a lot of people are confused about the difference between features, epics, and stories. So this is how work is broken down, flows between feature, then epics, which are just basically containers and wrappers for stories. Then it goes into the smallest form stories. And then if you need to, I know Jeremy loves subtasks and tasks, then other artifacts come to play: business rules, unit tests, activity diagrams, acceptance tests. All of that, most of that can be referred to in the user story and attached as a URL. And then story can act as a container to all of these artifacts. So when you have a product person in an agile world explain the bigger vision, rather than giving you a huge document, more likely than not, they're going to call you into a conference room. And I'm sure a lot of you guys will be invited to these things. And if you're not, please let us know as coaches. We'll encourage everybody to invite you. And if you're still not, invite yourself, because the product is going to adopt this as a strategy of how they're going to explain the product. So the backbone up there is the product features. These are going to be the very, very high level asks and requirements by the clients. Then they're going to be broken down into walking skeleton or sub features. And then all of these sub features are going to be broken down further into other smaller features or stories. And from then on, depending on the priority and the order, we're going to go top to bottom and left to right. And the biggest one that I've seen is in Blue Cross Blue Shield of Omaha. They have an entire product represented by sticky notes that cover an entire room left to right. It's the most grotesque and interesting thing that I've seen in my life. They literally took it seriously, and instead of using an electronic Jira tool, they took it upon themselves to create and break down the entire product. The result was phenomenal, because instead of somebody putting something into Jira while they're sitting at their desk and somebody seeing it 3 hours later, they all sat in the room, and as they were moving these client tasks and features, they were having conversations. Or actually, when somebody moved something higher than somebody else, they could have these healthy conversations on why the priority of something should be higher than something else, and why some tasks should be done before another within the product. And all these healthy real-time conversations happen when you actually do it in a room with other people. And you guys create a lot of artifacts. You might already be doing something similar. I'm not sure if you're involved in anything like this. It brings a lot of transparency. It brings a lot of common understanding. Once you have it, it's very easy to take a picture of the whole thing with your phone, and somebody can still enter it into Jira with the appropriate relationships, the work breakdown. What I assume will happen in your world, you'll be involved in a lot of the high-level creation of the backbone and the high-level features. You yourself will be tasked to probably create some architecture-related features and even backbones. If you're not involved in these conversations, again, I encourage you to reach out and be involved. I invited ASA. I'm kicking off Integrated Teller in 2 weeks, and I invited ASA. I really want him to be there and listen to the product person give their vision of how the product is going to evolve. Given story map organized vertically by necessity, we need only slides to plan, one slide to plan. Okay, so we still have the time constraints. So no matter how we run things, we can't have the whole skeleton or the entire wall in Blue Cross Blue Shield's case be done in a quarter. So it's very easy to get painter tape and literally or a marker and carve out the chunk of work that can be done within a release. and they have a very simple visual representation of what can be done realistically, or what can the team commit based on how many people they have and overall capacity to plug. So I'm not sure how, if you guys are going to continue as a team and you have a lot of common work, some of this in some other form might come into place. I don't see you guys running to this exercise like this in this current form for release. And I could be wrong. So on the planning side, on the highest level, that's the portfolio. I don't have it on there. Then it's projects. Then since we're running into quarterly releases, we have release plans, and then sprints, which for some reason I put the iterations there. And the artifact that comes out of each sprint is a potentially releasable product increment, meaning that the goal of each sprint is not just to keep people accountable and open up discussions at the end of 2 weeks. Teams are held liable to produce something that is usable by a client or another stakeholder as an increment. This is what I'm having the most difficulty with, because a lot of what you guys do will either be too small or too big to fit in a sprint. So where I see you guys living is more on the release plan and being involved more on a high level work breakdown. So Agile work is both iterative, means that as we go along, we fill in more and more detail of the work, and we flesh out more and more requirements, and we work on them. And it's also incremental in terms that not everything is being revealed at once. Create wall, dispensing. This is probably what they're trying to show is akin to what I was telling you guys about Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's method to the madness. A lot of companies use that to wrap their brain around complex software. It's amazing how extremely complex software can be represented by sticky notes on the wall by some of the brightest minds, and the type of quality conversations that can be had just by looking at these notes on the wall. Story principles. So stories may or may not be where you live, but in general, stories are independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, small, and testable. Meaning that if we're not sure if a story has some duality or there's some ambiguity, probably there's a good reason that probably that's an indicator that that story can be broken down into more stories, 2 or more, so that they're independent and people don't deal with ambiguity that way. They're negotiable. That means that there's enough information to where the team or the experts or stakeholders can negotiate all the ups and downs or all the benefits, cost benefits on doing the work as it is. Valuable, again, they're tied to something that is being valuable for the client. And this is where a lot of our discussions come. Well, if the client is not requesting because the client doesn't know what kind of architectural work needs to be done, then who are we tying that value to? Or how do our stuff, what features does it tie into? And this is probably where Ryan and other stakeholders will come in, to where they'll create features that specifically call out the value of the work that you guys are doing as architects that you can attach your work to. Estimatable, whether it's abstract and we estimate something in points or in hours, or we compare it to fish, say a whole sprint of work story will be a whale and anchovy will be something that gets done within a day or hour. Regardless, we need to have some way of being able to estimate work, and therefore the story should be estimatable. Small, so one of the principles, the cone of uncertainty. Well, the easiest way to explain it is in Agile, the further down the road or the closer meaning planning is gradual and it starts with these big feature chunks, and all work should be broken down until it's an appropriate size bites that can be given to the teams to work on it, so that we eat an elephant one bite at a time, and we're not going crazy trying to shoot these bites of work that are not sustainable within a sprint. That's the goal. Anything should be able to allow us to shoot holes at it. There shouldn't be any endless stories. There shouldn't be just a story out there that says maintenance on this, that, and the other, with a lot of ambiguities where that story cannot be completed within a certain amount of time. And anybody still awake on the phone?
Yeah.
Ah, you guys are killing me.
Or-
Does it make sense? Are there any questions on all that stuff? A lot of it is kind of largely theoretical still.
Yeah, it does. And one thing that I'll just briefly comment on, as we were going through the 10.0 project, and we had a whole bunch of wants and desires in the project, and we have 15 items we're adding in, and as we got into it, what's deliverable and the time frame we've had to trim that back to what is actually going to be in the release, and in trying to confirm with the product managers, are we in fact working on the right priority of items as they presented them in the storybooks that they had put together previously. And so that seems like it's sometimes of a challenge, for the product managers like to think of it, they got 5 number 1 priorities, and we need to get them all done. It's like, well, which one is the most important one? And it's like, well, I got this bank wanting this, I got another bank wanting this, and so sometimes it's a challenge for them to say what is their number 1 thing and number 2 and number 3. So
that's always been the case, but that's what I mean.
This is
and that
bringing that to light.
And this will continue. That will continue to be a challenge. But I think that's where when we talk about product management and getting their buy-in, and then getting them to have to commit to this. That okay, you have to choose. You have to choose. So tell me what you want us to work on first.
Yeah, they don't like that.
I get they don't, and I get that will continue to be a thing, but that's
yeah.
These are some of the things where I think that you'll get pushback, because that will be uncomfortable for them, and they don't want to do that, but they have to. So
The concept of a quarter release is different than the annual release that we seem to kind of be under from the big feature functionality things, and delivering a few more things more often, as opposed to a bunch of things all at once. Seems to be a better sale for them, talking with the customers eventually. But that's a conversation they need to begin pushing, and maybe they're doing some of that with conference and just ongoing discussions as well.
Yep. So.
Yeah, I mean, in my understanding, if you have 500 number ones, then nothing is really number 1 at the end of the day, and you overload the carts, and the horses are, instead of galloping, they're going to be jogging along, and then that pressure of not knowing what number 1 is gets transferred to you guys. And
no, exactly, that's right.
And what Agile does in effect is says, all right, let's, out of 5 number 1s, is do or die shutting the lights down, right? What is the real number 1? Okay, what is the number 2? And if they're all equal, what would you like to get done first? Okay, well, the first one then becomes number 1. First thing first, second thing second. There are a million ways to do it. Whether people are used to doing it, that will take some getting used to. It's a mindset. A lot of it is skill. But at the end of the day, that's why they make the big bucks. So they don't pass the buck to you guys.
Yep.
So.
But they've gotten real comfortable at that in the past. So changing that's going to be
right.
The process.
Well, I hear that, Keith, is he didn't stutter. He was very precise when he said we're going quarterly. So I feel their pain. I understand that they needed time to think about it, but I guess there's no better way than to do it than actually doing it a couple of times and then see what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, in all of this change, like that, there's certain areas you can just kind of see the problem, where this is. So, and us talking about it doesn't solve that problem. But I can just, that's where we're going to see some of the issues as we're truly fully implementing this into a true Agile development shop. So
we're in the crawl, walk, run. Right,
yeah.
We have to remind ourselves that we're still in the crawl, and we're doing great for being asked to crawl. We're not asking these guys to change their mind overnight.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
I got a few more guys. We have less than 15 minutes. I want to quickly run through a lot of the new stuff, a lot of the new weirdness that is proprietary to Fiserv Agile that Ben and Keith are wanting us to do. So when we say team, usually what is meant is a production team. And that's why outliers like you guys are specialized teams. You guys are more special forces than soldiers. It's very hard to decide, okay, are you guys a team or are you guys going to run as people that are kind of gravitating in a constellation of the team? And I still think for you guys, that's a lot of TBD. But on production, you're going to hear a lot about team, family, and extended family. And these things are still firming up. But these three distinctions, basically the team itself is a team that is dedicated to deliver certain work, and they may or may not be aligned with products, but usually they will be. On a family level, so like I have integrated teller will be a team on the team level. Then all the different teller teams will be on a family level within Bank Solutions. And then extended family level is even higher level of, so 3 levels of bunching them up. And the reason I'm getting confused myself is a lot of this is still being fleshed out on how teams will be broken down. But in essence, most of the core work will be done by the team. Then on a family level, you might see some people like, not an architect, but more of like a technology manager that is looking at high level commonalities between the different teams. If you guys are aligned to teams, you may end up being on your own team, but in many ways, you will be part of the family. If you're working on multiple similar teams, they may look at you as part of the family group rather than the core team. Or you might as well be very close to the team if you're all your work is concentrated, like Asa right now, all of his work that revolves around integrated teller will be very specific to what the 2 teams are. So he might be much closer to a team member than somebody on the family level. So just be mindful. We don't have set in stone definitions, but they're basically artificial barriers for us to kind of grasp how many degrees are we from Kevin Bacon? Was it Kevin Bacon? Yeah. All right. So team, self-organized collection, 2-pizza team. I don't know what a 2-pizza team is. Social loafing theory out there says that when a team gets larger than 7 to 9 people, people naturally tend to gravitate and break into smaller unofficial groups. So it's good to keep teams anywhere between 3 and 9 with the preference of keeping them closer to 7 members so that they are concentrated and they can collaborate better. Is that sustainable? Is that real? I've seen 40 teams with 45 members that are extremely efficient, and I've seen teams of 5 people that treat each other like they're part of 3 different groups too. So it's out there, but that's the general industry recommendation. Everybody writes tests, so there's a lot of, we're washing the boundaries down between who's a developer, who's tester. At the end of the day, we say the most important thing is that the client gets their cake and they get to eat it. what's the point of me putting my foot down and saying I'm a developer, I will never test? If we have 4 hours of work left and the client is waiting for it and you're the only person available to do it, do you want to work ahead and work on future stuff, or do you want to spend a couple of hours in helping the testers to finish the work and getting it done? Again, in Agile, we say getting work done faster and actually giving something to the client is more important than starting on 500 things. In reality, I don't know. Sometimes there's value of everybody in doing everything. We tend to gravitate towards that rather than specializing completely. What does it mean to be a team? That's all the tenets of self-organizations. They decide how they're going to do, when, who works on what. They create their own rules, and they all should be aligned to things that they determine on. So it's kind of like a microenvironment, microstructure to where they have their own life. They're by no means self-managed, but they are self-organizing as a unit. Coaches, where we come in, we help with the baseline. With a lot of ways, we're not doing coaching, we're doing a lot of training. We're doing a lot of the big retro. We're kind of there to plug in all these calls that they relate to Agile, servant leadership, and working ahead to connect all these structures as teams. So once we train all the teams, then we'll kind of look into concentrating more on managers and product people that are handling the teams, how the teams talk to each other, how we scale all the work that they do. Team enabler, the flow wizard, kind of unofficially, I know that Jeremy, for you guys, Jeremy Bedbury is already playing that role in many ways. He's kind of the servant leader where he's proposing different things. I don't think that officially there has been an edict from management of who plays that role for you guys. So I know it's still up in the air, but that's more of the guy or gal that facilitates, that kind of says, hey guys, I think this is what's happening. What do you think? He tends to ask as many questions as answers that they give. So a lot of the traits of managers, but yet at the same time, a leader that is one of many equals on the team. Cares about the financials, I don't know about that, but it's more challenging to improve and challenging to align us. And kind of like we're all, if you guys are all Navy SEALs, you're all the best of the best. You make a lot of your own decisions, but there still needs to be a kind of formal or informal leader within the pack who kind of says, all right, I'll go first, or I'll give the signal, right? Somebody steps up out there. So in the old world, in Scrum, that was a Scrum Master, and that's the Flow Wizard. Why such a weird name? Because Mark and Ben wanted to have a custom role that's only true to Fiserv, and a name that's so different than anything else in the industry aligns with that. A lot of people don't like being called wizards. I don't blame them. Product champion, that's in Scrum, that's the product owner. This is the proxy. That's the person that represents the product manager and mostly the business side. So that's what's different in Agile than in any other method. In Waterfall, anybody can come and go talk to a developer and say, you know what, stop doing this, you start that. You know what, it will be a little bit better if you do this and that. You know what, stop working on this story or this piece. Can you work on this one? This started being a higher priority. So what the product person does is to eliminate all that noise and starting and stopping and turning on a dime and all that stress and escalation. What we're saying in Agile is one and only one person should be responsible to arrange the stories and the priority in which they're done. And then once you pick up a chunk of stories that you need to get done in a sprint, then that becomes more or less a frozen box where you freeze that sprint and you only work on the stuff you committed. And only if there's a super, super, super high need for a new story to be brought in, you bring it in, but then you have to take something out. It's like a bucket of water. You bring bring something big in, water starts spilling over, so you have to take some water out in order to balance things out. I think of it more as a checkbook, and the product owner is the one who decides on what stories get worked on. So the team, like you said, doesn't have to play amateur project manager and sweat deadlines and things like that. So the teams only do the work, the product owner decides what the highest priority is, and then the team decides how much of the elephant they can chew for every 2 weeks. Like I said, in reality, we'll see how that plays out, but as coaches, we're brought in on teams to help bring that mentality to that person that plays that role. You have 3 minutes. They're negotiators. They protect and shield the team from all these players that you mentioned earlier that come and scream at the team that they want all their 500 number ones. They're the ones that should be sitting in on meetings rather than the team with those people that want the aggressive deadlines, and they shield the team from worrying about things such as deadlines. Team leads. This is more of a former developer and project manager role that, for example, for my team, for integrated seller, that's Bryce. So they're both a people and a technical leader, and they run and basically ask the question, what do you guys need to be successful? What skills do we need to train you on? What tools do you need? What high-level knowledge do I need to give you? For example, automation, do we need 1? Do we need 2 automated testers? So they kind of plug and play with the team, and this is more of a mid to long term, although they support the team in real time. They're much higher level. The team lead doesn't sit on the team. They're not considered a team member. They're more on the outside of that small constellation of product champion, the wizards, and the developers, QA and BAs that comprise the rest of the team. Product manager, they kind of sit on the side of the team. They're more on they could be on the family level, or they could be close to the team. The product manager sits on higher level meetings than the product champion. The product manager is working on a feature level, and they decide what features we need and why, and they work with a group of product owners or one product owner. The product manager can clarify things to the team, but it's usually the product champion is used as a proxy to actually give the team the level of detail that they need. So product manager, in many ways, their head is in the clouds. They think ahead of time. They work with the VPs. They work with very, very high level stakeholders. They work with the people that create the high level values and initiatives. So the product manager is somebody who is mandatory on all the initiative meetings that come from portfolio level. Product champion may or may not be on this high level of meetings, but they need to be joined at the hip with the product manager, because the product manager does not get involved directly with the team usually. So the product champion better know what's in the product manager's head, and they better meet regularly so that the team knows and they ensure that the team is working on the right stuff. For me, Ryan is both the team lead, product champion, and product manager for you guys in many ways. So I'm not trying to jam a round peg into a square hole. We'll see how things crystallize for you guys. I'm just looking at these roles. I'm not sure how much meaning they have to use. So there will also be a delivery manager. These are former project managers, and this is where the deadline conversations come to place. And these are the people that get yelled at by the clients usually, and especially the high caliber clients that want 500 number ones. You see that there are many levels. The attempt is clearly to isolate the teams from that deadline pressure and deadline noise. So the delivery manager will work with the product manager, and they'll work on these features, and then a lot of that high level decisions will be made by these guys. I tend to stay away from defining these roles because they will be somewhat custom on different teams, but in many ways they're also a servant leader, and they're also helping on the family level with teamwork. We're at time and 1 minute over. I can keep going, or we can wrap this up. We're about halfway. I feel like I've given you about 70% of what's on the slides and what should be meaningful to you guys. You let me know.
I can go either way. This stuff is more familiar to me, but so I'll defer to what the rest of the team wants.
Are we going to 11:30 or till noon? Oh, I
My
have it.
calendar, it was noon actually.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's up to you guys. We can turn it into a Q&A, or I can start going a little bit faster because a lot of that stuff is not defined. So that at least you can say that you've seen some of this stuff before and it's making sense, so that I expose you to kind of the high level of what the transformation is doing. So
I'd say just keep going.
yeah,
Hopefully
okay.
we can maybe, but so.
Yeah, works fine.
Sounds good. I'm not buying.
Fine with me.
So, all right, deal. So family lead, I jumped the gun. Actually, family lead, now that I think about it, that's Bryce. And me being confused is because all these are custom roles created for Fiserv. And even when I asked Ben, he's not exactly sure how a lot of that it will shake out. But they own quality and development, so they sign off on the release level. So while the delivery manager, product manager, and team leads might be working more on the feature level, which is more granular, the family leads, their head may be wrapped out around the release a lot more than anybody else's. This is the vision. Remember, a release contains one or more features within it. So while everybody else about family leads will be thinking about features, the family lead might be worried, what are we delivering for in the entire release? They may or may not be close to the team. They might be seeing the team on a daily basis. They might even sit amongst them, or they might be there on a monthly cadence. Business owner, I have no idea what that means. I inherited the slides from Ben, and I'm being completely honest. What I understand from looking at this, they're a person on a portfolio level. I don't even know who the business owner would be for you guys. I don't know who that would be on integrated teller. I'm not sure that person has been assigned that role yet, or if there will even be a business owner. So this is kind of FYI, both you and me. I think so, but there's a little bit of bleeding and kind of overlap in the Venn diagram between family lead, delivery manager, and business owner, from what I hear as far as explanation. I'm thinking on a bigger team that has a high visibility initiative that requires a lot of reporting higher up. We'll see more of these roles where they're kind of managing up these high level stakeholders, so that we're shielding the team so they're not getting pelted with pressure and the team actually gets work done rather than constantly reporting on how fast they're going. So how this shakes out, I'm curious to see myself. There'll be more details to come. I copied this from Ben. I have no idea what this is. Practices. Oh, that's okay. So definition of done. In my previous life, it was very common for me to get, whether it was a user story or a piece of work or some kind of request, and we say, well, we don't know half of the requirements, the most critical stuff is not there. And somebody says, well, we're already overdue for this, let's just get started. And we say, okay, yeah, we'll get started, we know a lot. And then time progresses, we keep asking, well, when are we getting the rest of the information? And we say, we hear, oh, we just don't have it, but get it done either way. And then at some point we start asking, okay, well, does this need to be tested? Is it getting released? Because it's not clear if this is getting released or not. We don't have a lot of information. Is it just development that needs to be done, and then we shelve it until QA looks at it? Are we going to shelve it also for BA to add more requirements? So all these unknowns in Agile are taken care of definition done, which is agreed upon by the team and the family stakeholders that are technical. On some of the teams are being introduced automation testing. So is it ROB, Retail Online, ROB? So ROB, probably not this quarter, but starting next quarter, they'll be asked to have things done like unit testing, API testing, if there are APIs, all the other different types of automated testing that are done, manual testing, functional testing, code reviews, all these subtasks in order for a story to be done. They're almost like invisible checkboxes, but they'll have to agree on as a team if these kind of practices need to be done. And they'll create some type of document at the beginning, even before they start the quarter, on what exactly is going to be needed in order for a story to be done. Are they going to need full requirements? Are they just going to go off of brief acceptance criteria? And they will decide that alongside the stakeholders as a team. And once they document it, when they're almost done with a story, they can look back at this document and kind of go, oh, okay, all right, we got all the types of testing done, development is done, oh, code review is not done. Do we need the code review? Yes, we do, because we agreed as a team that that's what definition of done is. That's when a story is considered done. They do the code review, and then it's done. And the reason this is created is so that there is no ambiguity on how far you need to go, boilerplating, and what activities need to be done in order to complete the work. I'll go as far as saying there are two stable conditions in an Agile process, although Agile is not exactly a process, but if we look at Agile as a work process, it's a continuous evolving process where things are constantly changing, and there are only two stable states of work. One time is when work is ready. That's basically when the business has determined what needs to be done, and they're handed it over to the team. And then the team starts working on it during the sprint, and then things continuously evolve, requirements evolve, new information may come in, a solution keeps evolving. And then when the team gets done with that story, then that story goes into another stable state, and that's the state of done. And then once it's done, then the client gets it, and the client starts shooting holes, and then it starts all over again where the client can say, you know what, I changed my mind. That piece of, or that feature, I don't want all the green, I want the blue, I want this menu not to be this deep, spread this menu around, whatever work they need. And then that keeps evolving. So the only stable states are ready and done. They're at the two gates of the sprints, before the team gets started on a story and when they get done. But it's very important to have common understanding and common definition of when something is ready to be started to be worked on. Again, that protects the team from rogue product owners and product managers who just want to slip stuff into the sprint to get done before they even know what they want. So it's good to have this as both a mechanism to help the team understand what is going on and to self-organize and self-manage. Sprint, what is a sprint? It's basically a box. It's a time box. It's anywhere between a week and a month, where the team agrees to work on something and deliver something usable at the end. That's all there is to it. Can sprints be extended? Very, very rare occurrences, but the reason why we don't want to do this is we'd rather come short and talk about what we can do next time to either plan better and estimate better, or something that hung us up and we could have found earlier, but we can become retrospective and look at what we could do better. So in a way, the time box is keeping us accountable, and it also gives us a chance to measure ourselves against our planning and against how we are learning, not so much learning about the product, but learning about ourselves and the way we work together as a team. Stand up. The most widely misunderstood meeting of all in Agile. Most people think that stand up, since originally it was described about answering 3 questions, what I did yesterday, what I'm going to work on today, and what impediments I have. It's a status meeting. It is not. The modern stand up, really what it is 15 minutes of your day where you get together as a team. It's almost, I look at it as a sports timeout. And a sports timeout at a football game, or let's call it a basketball game, coach calls a timeout, and then players start going, yeah, I just scored 13 points. Oh, I scored 5 points. I had 5 rebounds, right? What I did yesterday. It don't matter what you did last quarter. When the coach calls a timeout, it's all about what the score is and how we're going to win the game, how we're going to regroup to win the game. So that's what stand-ups should be too. Stand-ups are basically sports timeouts where you decide, whatever happened, happens. What I did yesterday is good. I can mention it. But the real true purpose of the stand-up is, what are we going to do by the end of the sprint to make sure that we deliver something usable to the client? Irrespective, I might have had a bad day. Jimmy was doing bad in school. So yesterday I was spacing out. It doesn't matter. It's not about calling somebody out because they should have been down by a story. You can ask politely, we can talk about it, but everybody has those days where we're just not on top of our game, or the story blew up, or you got called into a meeting that you didn't intend. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we use these 15 minutes as a team to kind of huddle and say, hey, we're all one team. What do we need to do to win the game and deliver what we promise on time? Or is it possible? Sometimes you have to draw the line and say, all right, let's cut our losses. We draw the line in chalk. Let's recommit to what's realistic and shoot that as a new goal. Sprint retrospective. This is 1 to 3 hours. Usually what happens if it's not done right. This is what I'm going to be coaching the Wizards a lot on. We sit in the room and we say, how did we do? And then it's painful silence, and then finally somebody gets tired of the silence and says, we did okay, but we could have done a little bit better. And then 5 other people say, I agree. And then you just wasted precious time of your day. Usually retrospective, what should be happening is a team should dig a little bit deeper than the surface. Everybody knows, because the statistics are there and the metrics are there, what we delivered. It's more of, how did we do based on our expectations? What can we do to get better next time? And let's look a little bit deeper into our contracts as a team. Are we being true to ourselves and working to the best of our ability? Are we communicating? Sometimes I notice that I'm shutting myself a little bit too much in my cubicle. Am I making myself available to my teammates? Are there anything that is extra and superficial and we just need to stop doing it? For example, a lot of conversations going on with the teams are test plans, elaborate test plans. Do we need to go boilerplate our test plans and have every nook and cranny defined and tested there? If we're going to give the work at the end of the sprint to the client, who is going to be shooting, and the product manager is going to be shooting holes at what we're doing anyways, and there's a chance that we're going to redo that work, right? So negotiating scope, all these things about how we work, our practices, are we doing code reviews correctly? A lot of times it's good to even call somebody out and say, hey, I had my code review on Wednesday. I expected somebody, when I was done coding on Wednesday, to pick up the code review by Friday, and nobody did. What's up, right? I mean, it's a chance for the team to look back on how things went for the past 2 weeks. And just like the military, for you guys as a team, you're not soldiers, you're Navy SEALs. Even Navy SEALs that are extremely masterful in the art of war, they still have military debriefs where they get together and they look back and say, Snuff went down this way. We wish we went that way. Maybe next time we can go this way. And it can be short and sweet meeting. It could be 30 minutes, but very active meeting. You document all the takeaways if there are things that you need to change. A lot of times these meetings are very active, so where people are throwing all kinds of stuff on the wall, so it's good to have a discussion. And that's where the facilitation skills of that wizard come into place. So instead of having a lot of noise and no commitments, a facilitator is assigned so that they're writing stuff down, the group decides on which things they want to act upon, and then action items are written down into Confluence, and they're made very visible, and the team continues working and talking about these things every 2 weeks until the team is proficient on what they committed to improve. So it's basically an improvement exercise. It steals a lot of valuable time for the whole team to sit together, but in the long run, it's extremely valuable. It prevents the effect of, well, nobody asked me anything, so why should I bother talking to the team? So this gives a forum to everybody to talk and improve. Sprint planning. There's a myth out there that Agile doesn't do planning, and people just do stuff. Talk about it to the teams that have been doing planning for a while. Basically, during planning, the product champion brings that list of work. It's like a Netflix queue, and you say, okay, I can only get 5 DVDs at a time per time period. We need to decide which ones we can commit to. Oh, by the way, in 2 weeks, these are big stories. We can only commit to 4 of them. But that's when the team looks at the stories, understands them even further in detail. And that's when you grab them from the backlog and you insert them into a Jira board in their to-do status. And at the end of sprint planning, basically the whole purpose is so the team can get realistic about what they can do in the next 2 weeks. A decision is made and the team says, yes, we commit to this. We're not 100% that we'll finish this. If we run short, we'll pull more work from the backlog. If we run over, then next time we'll get better at planning, and that's it. Backlog refinements. This is the why and what meeting. So even before planning, the product side, so the business introduces features and stories, and all these elaborate as cardinal, I want the columns of the Notre Dame built in order to have an imposing cathedral. This is a chance for a developer to look and say, columns, why are we working on the columns? The architects told me that we should be working on the foundation. And that's where the product champion says, oh, I just met with the architects, we changed our minds, we decided that the columns are going to be under the foundation because that would be a better architecture. And then the lead does, oh, okay, that makes sense. We move on. So it's basically an elaboration of the stories. It's an elaboration on why the stories are needed, why they're valuable, why the team should be working on them rather than on other stories, what the content is, why the client needs them, and what value we're bringing on them, and an appropriate level of technical detail as well. This is a good place to ask. It's a good place to have an architect in the room so they can talk to you guys and run some options by you. The danger of that is over-solutioning. We want the team to solution a little bit during planning and then during the sprint, but not so much during the refinement. The refinement is still more high-level what and why. It used to be called grooming, but in East Asia, it's people related to pedophilia, the term grooming. So backlog refinement is the official term. I myself, I've been calling this meeting grooming for so long that I can't think of another word to call it, and I still call it grooming, but just be mindful of that. Sprint review and demo. This is when all is said and done, the work is done, and the team demos this to the stakeholders. Usually when you say that to developers, they say there's no way I'm sitting out there and talking in front of a bunch of people and doing a dog and pony show. It doesn't have to be the developer, it could be anybody on the team. Usually it's a good practice for everybody to take turns demoing so that it gives a good chance not only to the stakeholders to review what was built in the 2 weeks, but also for the developer, the QA, for the BA to look at the software from a different perspective, from a client's perspective, look at it as a product rather than just something that I mechanically built. It spurs great conversations, and most importantly, it directly brings the team to the stakeholders, and the team gets an understanding of how the stakeholder thinks and what they want, and they hear that feedback directly. So that next time they're building something, they have one in mind, at the back of their minds, the developers understand in many ways based on the feedback what the client wants. So it eliminates, it's a feedback loop to allow the client to get feedback, and it eliminates a lot of the guesswork. And eventually a relationship is built between the team and the stakeholders, and the understanding of the product is much closer. Stand-up of stand-ups, that's a higher level meeting where rather than talking about, if we think of a regular stand-up as a timeout, this is timeout of timeouts. So this is more of the general manager.
Is this the same like when everyone says scrum of scrums too? Was that
Yes.
synonymous? Okay.
Yep. That's a
I've never heard it called stand-up of stand-ups. I've always heard it scrum of scrums, but
since we're not doing Scrum, and Ben wants to kind of get away from the mindset of us being liable to the Scrum guides and the classic Scrum, this was called stand-up of stand-ups.
okay.
But that's basically higher stakeholder. Usually what I do with these, I have one representative of the team. If this is a technical Scrum of Scrums, I would have the lead dev or one of the devs go. If it's a non-technical, then randomly we pick somebody, so that it's just not efficient in an agile world to have entire teams meet with entire teams constantly. So it's good to, a lot of times, not always, but it's good to pick a representative that once in a while gives an update on where things are at a higher forum. So I see this more at a product level or portfolio level, and it might be the wizard, might be the product champion, or maybe the tech lead on the team goes and says, okay, this is where we are, this is what we're working on, we're 1 week behind on what we thought we should be in this release, but we're making good progress, that's it, and then the next person talks. So in a way, if a representative of each teller team, say we pick randomly somebody on our integrated teller, and this is Scrum of Scrums for all the people that represent the teller teams, then somebody on the portfolio level just gets a temperature check on how things are going with all the teller teams. And there could be many different structures. For you guys, you might end up on some of these, or you might want to go and listen in on some of these to see where things are going. It just depends on the granularity of work that you're doing for whom and why. Leon, sounds like you're already on some of these, or you've been part of some of these.
No, I've been aware of them though. I typically have never gone to a scrum. Well, that's not true. When in Engage, we would do the and we did the one where you talked about where we'd randomly assign people, and I don't know how important they were but they seem to prove. The importance comes when we really have to be making sure we're coordinating across teams about some sorts of features for some whatever particular reason. But
right.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it's good. It's
okay.
good.
I was not aware of the Scrum of Scrums concept, so this is new to me.
Yeah, it's a lot of these meetings, in a way, they mimic the postmortem that military groups make after battle. So after each battle, the next morning, the Scrum team gets together or together and talks about, okay, how are things going? How are we going to win the battle, right? And this is more of a higher level on, I don't know, commander or general, right? A bunch of commanders huddle together, and the general says, okay, how is each battle going for you guys? So there could be many levels. I've seen it as high as 3 or 4 levels of Scrum of Scrums. I've seen even Scrum of Scrums on the level of CEO, where every portfolio manager sits in a circle with the executives and they give an update on their portfolio of products that they're working on. So Hickory, when I say Hickory, I think Thad Portraz and his team. The why, the current, so we can't completely break with waterfall. I'll try to make this in 2 minutes. We can break from waterfall, but at the same time, our waterfall is way too heavy with all of its requirements. So there's a lighter flavor of waterfall that is being created to coexist alongside the Agile teams. And a lot of the audits and accountability on the Agile teams is going to also follow the model of accountability that the Hickory model is bringing in. So this is a picture on the left side is the waterfall, how things ran from silo to silo, from box to box. Basically, the chicken was thrown over the fence, and somebody was plucking the chicken, then somebody butchered the chicken, and then instead of working together collaboratively, work was passed down. And this is the hybrid plan on the right side that looks a lot like if Waterfall and Agile had a baby, then that ugly baby, oh wait, did I go there? I did. All right, so that baby is called Hickory. Hickory is because Ben and Thad were throwing around names on what to call it.
So we can say synonymously Hickory or ugly baby.
No, that was a very
No, I think that's what we've not coined it. When you say Hickory, I'm just going to hear ugly baby.
No, in reality, we need this. It's very hard to be held accountable in a waterfall way when you're doing Agile. It's almost impossible. I've been in places, Lincoln Financial Group, where in effect we ran waterfall, but we're required to report Agile metrics, and the other way around. I've been in places where waterfall teams are doing Agile, but the project management is requiring waterfall metrics, which is darn near impossible. So we do need something in between. And even for the pure waterfall teams that are out there, it's still better for them to transition into something that can be put in Jira, and things could be made more visible and transparent. And it's easier for us to talk between the Agile world and their world than talking 2 different languages. There's a lot of it on Confluence, and I know that Thad and his teams constantly add stuff out there. I like the FAQ page, and there is also a page where it talks about the champions, Hickory champions. I think we discussed it already, and I shot you guys an email. Every team, including ours, is assigned a Hickory champion, and those are the people, the same way I can go on rants for hours about Agile, they should be able to go on rants about Hickory. So they'll talk about the baby. I know a little bit, we're exposed to some training, but on purpose, Mark is keeping us away from deep diving into Hickory because there'll be a lot of demand for people to explain Hickory, and we're needed on the Agile side. So this is the only slide I put out there, the 2 slides basically saying this is what it is, the purpose is that, in previous companies, some companies have ran on Hickory-like models for a long time, and I've been burned by them, but I also understand the necessity to have a hybrid model to help very heavy waterfall teams to transition into something that's more lightweight. So I commend Thad's efforts to create that. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of translation and integration into things that we're not doing right now. Where this comes to play, we're 1 minute over, so I'm going to wrap up with that. Where Hickory comes to our world is, so all the time tracking currently is done on a feature level, and the time tracking aspect is tied with the audit aspect. So all the artifacts that will be delivered to end clients for audit purposes and time tracking are going to come on the feature level. So the feature level is our commonality between Agile and Hickory, that both are going to have features, and that's where a lot of that documentation and artifacts are live and come from. It's all play after the
Yeah.
valuable time, I understand, but a lot of that mumbo jumbo, you're gonna hear it, so you better see the official slides and what we're teaching people. So my hope is that you even correct them, because you guys in many ways have much higher understanding of what is going on than the general population. How this plays with you guys, I mean, the more we dig into Jira and we go back and forth with Ryan, we'll know more what works for you guys. I was very hesitant to jump in and take you guys as a team and give you the cookie cutter thing and start jamming the square peg into the round hole. I'd rather have you guys figure out where you want to go with this.
Sounds good.
Let's go to that. Let's go eat.
Yeah, you're cutting out quite a bit, but thank you much, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. And I can have as many of these as you want. We can specialize and zoom in on something, on roles as we go along. There will be many opportunities. That's what I'm here for. I can create a special event for whatever you guys need training on. That's what I'm here for. As long as it's Agile, I'm here for you guys.
Cool, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yep. See you. Bye.
Thank you.